All right, um, the life and adventures of Michael Armstrong, Fctry Boy, where this is the last bit of Michael in the not the last bit of fight of Michael's introduction to the factory, which I left with him watching the other factory boys rushing and scooping out stuff from the pig trough, getting the offal before the pigs got it, and indeed competing with the pigs to get it, the angry pigs. And this is where he meets Fanny. Um, um, Fanny, yes. What's her full name? Because I should, I should. Fanny Fletcher. Fanny Fletcher is the name of the little girl who is 11 and who was raised good and Christian all the way up until the age of 10 or 11, when unfortunately both her mother and father passed on, and she was sent to the workhouse and then as an apprentice to Deep Valley, where she assumes that the assumption that the author makes is that the parish people thought that they were getting them a good life, good trade, because these poor people, they got to have something to do. But she's been consigned basically to death, and indeed her lot seemed to be a new lot, and she hasn't kind of faded yet. She still has a bit of brightness in her eye. Um, Francis Trollope makes a point in this. It's interesting. Fanny Trollope is what she can be called. So, but makes a point of saying that this kind of slavery in England is actually much worse than the African slave trade, which it's always that horrible thing of just of comparing one fucking horrible thing to another fucking horrible thing. Unfortunately, probably this is where you know Frances Trollope is unfortunately is overreaching herself. But there's probably is a valid thing to be said about how you're treating these children is not dissimilar to the African slave trade, though the African slave trade definitely probably comparing atrocities. Guess what? You lose, and thank God. But yeah. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing. That's an example of Francis Trollope kind of getting a little too getting a little too kind of overreaching. I mean, and she really gets into a thing here where she is scolding the people who are going to be like, what there's this thing. Let none dare to say this picture is exaggerated till he has taken the trouble to ascertain by his own personal investigation that it is so. It is a very fearful crime in a country where public opinion has been proved, as in the African slave trade, to be omnipotent, for any individual to sit down with a shadow of doubt respecting such statements on his mind. If they be true, let each in his own little circle raise his own voice against the horrors detailed by them, and these horrors will be remedied. But woe to, so actually talk about this, raise your voice against it, and we'll remedy it. But woe to those who supinely sit in contented ignorance of the facts, soothing their spirits and their easy consciousness with a cuckoo's note, exaggeration, while thousands of helpless children pine away their unnoted, miserable lives in labor and destitution, incomparably more severe than any produced by Negro slave trade. So yeah, that's it's unfortunate that Fanny Trollope would say, "Don't call this exaggerated," while at the very same time, uh, you know, incomparably more severe than any produced by Negro slavery, by the African slave trade, the triangle trade. It's like, wow, that is patently a horrible exaggeration that this white woman is talking about, in reference to, we've got white English children versus black Africans being enslaved and carted over to die in their thousands and millions, in the passage back into the plantations. Another source of the wealth of, it's interesting, two things that are very much the sources of the wealth of the British industrial system that builds up the big thing, the big empire that builds up, the British Empire that builds up. It's like this is it's it's like I'm going through Canadian history at the moment and kind of bemoaning how terrible it is. It's like, yeah, and Canadian history in a part is a offshoot of the really horrible, horrible, horribleness of British history. We're merely an offshoot of it. And I think about how horrible that is, and the moral stuff that I've got to deal with there. I should feel terrible for all those poor British people that have got to deal with much even more than that. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I will leave it there. But yeah, that's Frances Trollope really overstepping herself. You can tell that it's from a good place. There's also just the sort of thing of Christianity here, um, and how much you're going to take this Christianity, is like how much of it is supposed to be I think middle class, um, kind of progressive Brits are take Christianity as the thing that's going to lead them out of this mess, whereas I'm sure I have a feeling that there's a lot of people will say, no, this is actually one of the tools of this mess, that the parish system that the church is running is indeed, I mean, I'm looking at that at the moment with how it was definitely used by the government as a tool in Canada against Native peoples, ran the residential schools, was basically the foot soldiers and the spies for the government, and really pushed agendas to control Native people for their own power. And you can see how that kind of you can link that up to how impoverished, poor people, poor children, poor women, poor men in Britain were also controlled by the church, and that they're very culpable in that, and not maybe a positive thing. There's always positive people in it, but there's a general overarching structure here that should, I think, make you pretty suspect of all the kind of the Christian propaganda getting pushed by Frances Trollope, while she is definitely decrying what is rotten, rotten, rotten in her country of the time. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.